and I'm here today just as a facilitator for the leaders of faith who are going to be speaking today. They far more articulately and clearly than I can speak to the concerns that they have with the sort of campaign that Doug Wardlow has been waging, including his very extreme rhetoric against members of the Muslim community. So we're going to start with Asad Zaman. Thank you, Imam.
Good afternoon. I'm Imam Asad Zaman, ASADZAMAN, Executive Director, Muslim American Society of Minnesota. At its best, elections are about ideas that are thoroughly debated. It is natural and expected that opposing sides will vigorously debate ideas about policy, and Minnesotans expect to have a good debate, and they expect to support and eventually elect candidates who best articulate policies that they can support and approve. We understand that good neighbors can disagree, and disagreements are natural. And all of that is good. What is not acceptable is for the religious background and ethnic identity of candidates to be attacked. Our great nation was founded by people who were fleeing religious persecution. Their descendants enshrined into the U.S. Constitution the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment to guarantee that all Americans of all religious backgrounds would be welcome and able to participate fully in this great nation. The recent mailers by Doug Wardlow are a significant departure from what America is all about. He has chosen to attack his opponent's religion, and he has chosen to attack religious institutions. These actions are un-American and un-Minnesotan. All people of goodwill should rise up and oppose it. All people of goodwill should reject this rhetoric. This rhetoric is not without consequence. Every election cycle, including this election cycle, imams like myself have to provide pastoral care for school children who are bullied because of rhetoric like this, to the little girl whose hijab was pulled off in the playground, to the young boy who was called a terrorist because of rhetoric like this. It is because of rhetoric like this, by people who were radicalized by rhetoric of this type, that a mosque in Minnesota, in Bloomington, Minnesota, was bombed. So this rhetoric has consequences. I condemn this inflammatory rhetoric of Doug Wardlow. I call upon him to apologize immediately. I call upon him to return the funds he has collected from this divisive rhetoric. The people of Minnesota do not want to be divided. We understand that we are stronger together when we are united, regardless of how we pray and how we worship and what we look like. Thank you very much.
My name is Lori Eaton, and I am pastor at Our Savior's Lutheran Church in Minneapolis. As a private citizen, I'm proud to say that Keith Ellison has represented my values and priorities of justice, inclusion, and care for the most vulnerable, both through his work as an attorney and during his public service in Minnesota and Washington, D.C. As a person of faith and as a leader of a faith community, I am compelled by my faith convictions to stand strongly in opposition to the kind of racist and Islamophobic attacks that have been directed at Keith Ellison during this campaign. Convictions like our Christian call to love our neighbors as ourselves, the conviction to welcome the stranger that we share with our Jewish and Muslim siblings, and to care for those who are vulnerable and oppressed. At Our Savior's, we host an English Learning Center dedicated to teaching English, math, citizenship, and computer skills to the very newest immigrants to our country. Many of the students coming in and out of our building right now are Muslim, and they're working hard to build a new life in this country. As the anti-Muslim rhetoric began to escalate in recent years, we chose as a congregation to specifically and publicly announce that we welcome our Muslim neighbors. They share the same God-given humanity. They are equally created in the image of God and worthy of dignity, respect, and the opportunity to thrive. We refuse to be divided by fear and bigotry. Keith has demonstrated his commitment and integrity during his many years in faithful public service, and it is unconscionable to tolerate or excuse such vicious language and falsehoods. I believe in a Minnesota where all are welcome, and that we are made stronger by the rich diversity that is a hallmark of our state. We are better together, and we are greater than fear. Thank you.
I am Rabbi Marcia Zimmerman, Senior Rabbi of Temple Israel in Minneapolis. And I'm here to say that the interfaith dialogue I have done throughout the years, I believe is the antidote to religious violence and to religious vitriol. I truly believe when we come together and hear one another's narratives that we are stronger. I just returned at 5 a.m. this morning from Israel with 31 women from our community. We heard the voices, the many voices of women in that region. Often that region is represented by conflict, but the voices we heard over the last 10 days were ones of Arab, Muslim, Christians, Jews, women working together to work towards peace. My hope is that we live out the words of Rabbi Hillel, who in the first century taught us these words, Im ein ani li mili. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? Each of our traditions stands strongly in our own narrative, a pride of our practice, of who we are, our histories. And so these words of hate towards another tradition is not truly living the words of Hillel. Hillel continues, "Ukashe ani la'atzmi ma ani." If I'm only for myself, what am I? Feeling the strength of our own religious traditions and history of pride, then we come together to hear another's, to be enriched in our own tradition by opening ourselves up to someone who is different. And then he ends, Ve'im lo achshav eimatai. If not now, when? Now is the time for us as religious leaders to speak out. Because when we see hatred, we need to come together in dialogue and speak the truths of our faiths together, stronger, like Minnesotans want us to be.
Good afternoon, my name is Grant Stevenson. I minister here in St. Paul and build climate justice communities around the state of Minnesota. In the last 3 years or so, we in the state of Minnesota have been shocked. While much of the country has descended into fear-mongering, race-baiting, and Islamophobia, far too often led by our own president, it's been a horror show, and we've mostly escaped it here in Minnesota, until now. Now Mr. Wardlow has decided to go there, and those in his party, including at the top of the ticket, running for governor, have remained silent. For good Minnesotans, the kind of race baiting and fear mongering that Mr. Wardlow's comments are needs to be called out, and it needs to be rejected. Now, in the faith communities, we have a breadth of political viewpoints and experiences. We have conservative and moderate Republicans. We have moderate and progressive Democrats right in the faith communities. And you know what? It's a great place, actually, to talk and to debate and to argue sometimes. Sometimes even to find common ground. But for faith communities, be they Jewish or Muslim or Christian, there can be no common ground with race baiting, with racism. There is no common ground with Islamophobia. These are always wrong. And make no mistake, these words have an impact. I've had calls from friends of mine today in the Isaiah organization, which often works to bring forth in a nonpartisan way a conversation across racial and ethnic lines. Today they are receiving threats, members of the board, staff, from the kinds of people that Mr. Wardlow is unleashing with his comments. These comments that he's making to raise money have an impact on our community, and it is devastating. We have a different vision. Those of us who are standing here, we envision a state where every single person is safe. We envision a state where no matter how much money you have, no matter what community that you come from, no matter what job you have, the laws of Minnesota protect you, and that's the job of the Attorney General. No matter who you are, the Constitution of this state and the Constitution of the United States applies to you. And if anyone's wondering, there is only one Constitution. Mr. Wardlow thinks that that's a radical vision. I think it's a vision for a better state and for a better country. We're asking today for Mr. Wardlow to denounce the mailing for solicitation of funds that he sent out that is race baiting and fear mongering and anti-Muslim. We're asking him to denounce it. And we're asking for the GOP, on whose ticket he runs, to denounce this mailing. And finally, we're asking Mr. Wardlow's campaign to return any funds that it has raised through hatred and fear mongering and Islamophobia. Thank you for being here. We can take questions if you have them.
Imam Zaman, could you talk to us a little bit about what the Muslim American Society is? It's being described as a radical group or a group that sympathizes with terrorists.
Sure. Thank you very much. As you rightfully noted, I'm the Executive Director of the Muslim American Society of Minnesota. The Muslim American Society has church status with the IRS. We operate 3 masjids or churches where people go and pray 5 times a day. We do food shelves, we do children's faith formation classes, children come and play soccer at our gyms, we have a basketball gym. We do just about everything you would encounter in a normal church, except we're Muslims. We are an American institution. I guess it's politically convenient for him to try to scapegoat newer Americans or Americans of the Muslim faith, and that's what's going on here.
He's also tried to make connections to Louis Farrakhan, and because of Farrakhan's anti-Semitic rhetoric, and Congressman Nelson has said that he's maybe met him once in his own defense. I mean, does anybody here want to speak to the whole Farrakhan factor that's raised his mailers?
Well, I think the Ellison campaign has already addressed the so-called Farrakhan controversy. It has been addressed several years ago. I think there is nothing new there. I, of course, I'm not an expert in any of this, and I think we should let the record speak for itself.
If I could say one more thing about this, also, John, it's an example of the kind of unfounded fear-mongering that's happening. Congressman Ellison actually has a record. He's been a member of Congress for years. He's been at the highest levels of the Democratic Party in the country. There's an actual record. So to dig up things that there's somehow some secret thing happening, it's just the kind of thing we're talking about.
Is saying sorry enough? I mean, like you guys have talked about, the damage has already been out there. Is, you know, is sorry enough?
You mean from Mr. Wardlow?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Or
it's-
the GOP?
No, it's not enough. They need to renounce the kinds of language and frankly, the kinds of fear that they're trying to elicit. And we're asking for any funds that they've raised through this mailing to be returned.
All right, if there's no more questions, we thank you for coming today.
Thank you.